Okay, so yeah, my name is Scott Nelson, and I come from a fine arts background. Went to Art Center. I've been an artist most of my life since I was a kid, and got married in the 90s and needed a way to pay the bills, and it's hard to pay the bills when you're just selling paintings. So wanted to do something that had to do with texture and color and architecture, modern design. Love all those things, and I had been on a study abroad program in Europe and the Middle East and fell in love with the architecture over there, especially the old traditional buildings. Especially the materials and the finishes that I saw in these buildings, like a tool shed in Tuscany is gorgeous, right? Compared to our tough sheds here or whatever. So I came back here and I thought, gosh, our buildings here are so bad, and a lot of it had to do with the materials, right? The only difference, it could just be a cube of a building, but if it's done with beautiful materials, it can be a beautiful building. And so I started researching these old materials, and a lot of what they used over there would have been either limestone or clay or various kinds of stones. And I realized that a lot of those recipes could be incorporated directly into the way we build here, which is primarily stick frame or framed buildings, right? We'll get into some of the other methods of building as well, but primarily in a place like Los Angeles, everything is framed up. And I thought, well, this is fantastic. We can incorporate these materials here. And so I started my company, Natural Walls, in the 90s as a way to begin to familiarize contractors, designers with these materials and how they can be used here. So that's primarily what we do. I'm a licensed plaster, painter, lath, and drywall. But we do pretty much just specialty projects. They're calling for these kinds of materials. Brought my friend Patrick Webb as well. He is a product representative for American Clay. He's actually works with them. He just came back from their space in Albuquerque, but he lives in Santa Monica here. Also represents Platro Viageot. They are a French gypsum lime manufacturer. Their materials in the Louvre, in all kinds of places, all over the Middle East. So he'll talk a little bit about what he does and what he represents as well at the end. So he's a fantastic resource. So I have a little outline here to go through, and we can get really deep into this stuff. We'll try to kind of get the gist of it, and then keep some time at the end for questions. So natural wall systems, I call it natural wall systems rather than just natural walls or natural finishes, because for a building to be really well done with these materials, it's really a whole wall system. A lot of people think of faux finishes, or they think of the finish just over the drywall on the inside, and they save maybe a little bit of money at the end to do their powder room with a faux finish or something, and faux finishing has kind of gone out of style anyways, thankfully. But when it's a system, when I'm talking with architects or designers, I like to stress that it's a system, because to create a healthy, energy-efficient building, you have to think of it that way. Biomimicry, have any of you heard of this field that's just starting to come to the verge? It's really, really amazing stuff. There's some fantastic books out right now on biomimicry. What it essentially is looking at natural structures and systems as a way to design and manufacture things that we make. It's fantastic because so many of the questions we have, problems we have already been answered by millions of years of evolution. So yeah, you look at the structure of a living cell, for example, and it's amazing. It's just the most fantastic study you can imagine. It's a little universe in a very small space. So I started to think about what, when you're going to build a house, what's the clearest parallel in nature to a home or a house? To me, it seems to be a living cell, right? A living cell has a boundary to it, right? If there was no boundary to a cell, it wouldn't exist. It would die. All its insides would be all over the place. It doesn't have a way to protect its functions, right? But that membrane that's protecting that cell also has to be semi-permeable. If it's completely impermeable, there's no way for a movement of energy and materials to go in and out of that cell, and it would also die. So either way, the cell is dead. No membrane, membrane. Same with the house. Here we shrink wrap most of our houses, right? We think, you talk to most contractors and all they're thinking about is I want to keep water out of the building because I don't want to get sued, right? Problem is when you shrink wrap it, and when I say shrink wrap, I mean we put cement stucco on the outside and then we paint it. Paint is generally not very vapor permeable, and then we put drywall up and we paint the inside. So there's no way for it to be a permeable membrane like a cell wall. And what that does is holds moisture inside the walls, creates mold situations, traps toxins inside your house, VOCs, if you've heard of those, we'll talk about those in a minute. All the stuff that's off-gassing from the carpet, from the paint, everything else stays inside your house. So interior air quality can be 10 times worse than the smog outside, honestly. I mean, it's really bad. You may have heard of toxic house syndrome. A lot of people are starting to realize that they are allergic to their own houses. They have horrible allergies, they're sick, and no doctor can tell them what it is, and they begin to think, I think maybe it's my house. So, this is what I'm big on, is the house needs to be a living cell. And this is really where architecture and design are going. I mean, if you want to be on the cutting edge of what's happening in design right now, start studying homes as living cells, because this is where it's going to be in 5 years, 10 years. It's already happening. The house is functioning, where they're putting solar panels or doing permeable membranes, the house is functioning like a piece of nature. It's really pretty awesome. And it makes the rest of our buildings just seem dead. So that's kind of where I'm going with this. Brief history of natural wall materials. So these materials are new in our consciousness in a way, but they are very ancient. These go all the way back to places in Turkey Patrick was telling me about. They're even older than my first one there, 12,000 years ago. Ain Ghazal in Jordan, just east of Israel, 7200 BC, they found these lime plaster statues. Inner chambers of the pyramids, 2000 BC, even the outside of the pyramids, they surmise, may have been coated with lime plasters. They would have been white, gleaming across the sands. It would have been mind-blowing. Malta was used as a building mortar, so in between the stones. Great Wall of China was built with limestone and lime mortars. In fact, one of the materials we use, they are repointing the Great Wall of China right now. It's ongoing, of course, with a material that we use from France. Pretty cool. Aztecs, streets and walls, Roman Greece, Middle Ages and Renaissance, they took it to a whole new level. They created something called Marmorino, which is, you've heard of Venetian plaster, that polished stuff. It was really the Renaissance, primarily. I think that they kind of perfected that in the Middle Ages. Fresco, of course, Sistine Chapel is lime plaster, raw pigments painted onto the lime plaster, and they last forever and forever because the pigments have been carbonized or integrated right into the wall itself, rather than sitting on top. More locally, the Southwest, if you've been to Santa Fe, you've seen all the adobe buildings. North Africa, Morocco, you've seen the big mud, those fantastic mud cities. Those are all, of course, earth plaster. It's very important to use earth plaster in adobe situations like Santa Fe because they started using cement on some of those buildings in Santa Fe and it started destroying the adobe because it was sucking water right into the adobe, holding it there, and then the mud would just fall apart. So we'll get into that a little bit more later too. So there's a long, long history of these materials, and it's fascinating read. Many, many books you can read about the history of lime plasters, clay plasters, gypsum plasters. A little bit about benefits of natural wall systems, because of course we want to know why we want to use these in the first place before we do all this talking and studying. So first of all, you'll get this from, if you're an interior designer and you're working with an architect, or if you're going to be an architect, you want to know the stuff you're putting in isn't going to fall apart a month later and your client comes to you and he says, what's the deal with this stuff? These materials have been around, like we've already said, for thousands and thousands of years. So they have a long, long pedigree. Unlike many of the building materials that are coming online right now, where it's the latest, greatest thing, and you've probably heard a lot about this. There's all the lawsuits around new stuccos and new ways of insulating and all. They just put them online and say, this is the best thing, and you put them up, and then you realize there's problems with it. This stuff has been tested for thousands of years, which is really a huge benefit as a designer. Healthy for humans and the planet. To me, this is really important. This is even higher than than just how the building performs. Because if we're going to stick around as a species, we've got to start doing our buildings better. Percentage of energy use, building and then heating and cooling those buildings, I think in the US is like, isn't it like a third of our energy use? I believe it's a third of our energy use in the US is just buildings. So it's a huge, huge issue from an energy standpoint. Most of these materials are manufactured with less energy than some of the more synthetic or modern materials like cement and plastics that we're used to. Lower firing temperature for lime plaster by about 2/3 than cement. A lot of these materials can be recycled, or they're made of recycled stuff. With a lime plaster, you can literally just take whatever you have left, like chunks of it off the ground, crush it up, throw it in your garden. Trees love it. It actually creates a more alkaline soil. Whereas with chunks of cement, you can't do that. You have this huge waste problem at the end where you have mounds of cement, say a freeway project, and you got to grind this stuff up to use it again or to recycle it. Whereas with lime plaster, you just throw it in your garden. It's awesome. There's no PVC or VOCs from off-gassing, therefore it's better for air and soil quality. PVC is one of the most toxic chemicals that humans manufacture. And it's in a lot of paints and most stuccos, synthetic stuccos. And you look at a building, the stucco is peeling off the building and going right into the dirt around the building. And it's mostly PVC. It's like, what's wrong with this picture? VOCs, if you're familiar with them, it stands for volatile organic compounds. And a lot more people are conscious of it now because of the air quality management district around here. So solvents have these things they're shooting off, organic compounds, volatile organic compounds, and they go into your liver, they go into your tissue, and they stay there basically, and they can give you cancer. And yet it's, traditionally it was in a lot of our glues, carpets, upholstery, all kinds of stuff. Electromagnetic fields, EMFs. So in our buildings these days, we have all this wiring around us, of course. And you talk to any physicist and they'll tell you all that wiring is giving off all this static, essentially, or positive ions. And it can make you feel jumpy, it can make you feel nervous, it can make you feel anxious. And our bodies are taking in all that electromagnetic energy. So earth, stone, they help to actually buffer that. So when you do a coating of American clay or a lime plaster on the inside, it's helping to buffer the EMFs, which is pretty cool. As many of these plasters react and then carbonize, harden, cure, they are taking in CO2. So they're actually, to some degree, becoming closer to carbon neutral. They're helping to fight global warming. Of course, it required a bit of CO2 to make them, to fire them, but then it's taking some back in as it's curing. Negative ion inducing, this is kind of related to the EMFs. So you have this humidity in the room, right? And as the humidity goes up and down, in a room that's shrink wrapped and it's just paint, that paint doesn't do anything for that humidity. The humidity is just all over the place. If you have a vapor permeable interior air surface, it's actually absorbing humidity and releasing it, so it's keeping your humidity at more of a constant. And one of the reasons we have to heat and cool our houses so much is that humidity is going up and down. And humidity, moisture, as you know, holds temperatures. So it's taking the temperatures with it, and it makes for a very volatile interior air situation. So you could say these walls are living walls, essentially. They're interacting with the air rather than just being dead once they've dried like paint. Does that make sense? Interacting with the air. So that's a few of the ways that these materials are healthier for humans, for us living in the buildings, as well as for the earth that the buildings are sitting on. Buildings that are done very well this way could literally go back to the earth in a few hundred years and just be part of the soil again. So they're recycling, it's cradle to cradle, right, rather than cradle to landfill, like most of our houses right now, where we manufacture, we do the mine, we manufacture, and then they go straight to the landfill. This way, we get it from the earth, we build the house, it goes right back to the earth, which is really amazing, which is what our houses should be. Our houses should benefit the earth they sit on, not hurt it, not detract from it. I mean, humans are the only organism that creates waste products that are outside the cycle, right? They don't. Waste in any other organism is food, right? A lot of what we make for waste is not food for anything else. We're outside of that cycle, which can only last for so long. That's not sustainable. We've been doing it for a couple hundred years, but it's not going to last forever. At some point, we'll have to stop doing that, or we'll be forced to. Building envelope performance. So from a design, architectural standpoint, these are very important questions. Architects want to know, well, sure, it's healthy, and that's great, and you know, if you're a granola living in the woods of Santa Cruz, then I'm going to build a house like that, but nowhere else. But actually, these materials perform very well. Low elastic modulus just means it's more flexible than particularly something like cement stucco. A lot of people stay away from stucco because they've seen it crack all over the place. You've seen, like, usually a smooth troweled house, right, where they haven't painted it, and the color was in the cement, and they troweled it, and it just cracked all over. That's just what cement stucco does. You really can't guarantee it's not going to happen. Now, we never say no cracks in a building done with lime plaster, but we have done buildings where there were no cracks, and that was without control joints. Control joints being those things they put metal regolith into buildings to help the panels kind of move around if they need to, so it cracks at the joint rather than through the panel. So we've done huge walls, no control joints, and had no cracks on the whole wall. A lot of it has to do with the building being very stable as well, so as long as it's well built, there's very few cracks. Less need for control joints, more vapor permeable. I've touched on this a little bit. That just means that vapor can go in and out of the walls better. Now, this doesn't mean that your walls are going to leak. Vapor is a completely different thing than water. You want that vapor to be able to get in and out. It actually keeps the temperature better inside, and it keeps the inside of your walls much drier and healthier. Regulates humidity, like we talked about a bit already. It's interacting with the humidity in the air. It's taking it in, releasing it, keeping it more of a constant. Energy efficiency. Most of these materials are less dense than something like cement. The problem with density in cement or stone is that it gets up to a certain temperature and it stays there for a long time. Like a stone house is not necessarily a very energy efficient building unless it's a very soft or semi-porous stone like a limestone or something. Like a granite house is not very energy efficient. They're pretty miserable actually because they'll be very cold in the winter, very hot in the summer. A porous limestone house is fantastic. Adobe house is fantastic. And the difference being that adobe is not very dense. So it has air pockets within it. It allows vapor exchange. Fantastic. If you want to do the perfect house and you're in Santa Fe, build it with adobe, coat it on the outside with the lime plaster, on the inside with the clay, and that thing will be 70 degrees all year long. If you start coating it with cement and painting it, then you ruin all that, which I've seen happen. That's called cold bridging, by the way. Like in our modern buildings, we have 2x4s, and then we have our shear wall sitting right on the top of the 2x4. Because a 2x4 is fairly dense, it's taking cold right through the density of that 2x4. So we're realizing we need to have some insulation, a sheet between the framing and our exterior material. And we'll get into some other ways to do that in a minute as well. So cement is cold bridging. It takes temperature right through it. Safer for use in restoration with soft masonry such as limestone. So we recently did a project for the Huntington Library on their Japanese house. We worked with the conservator there, and they're big on this. If you want to get into any kind of restoration architecture, which is a fascinating field, really cool field to be in, you'll want to know about historic mortars. Another problem that happened, Europe, 100 years ago, cement was the big thing. It's hard, it's durable. They started pointing all their masonry with new cement, and then their buildings started crumbling, and then wondering why. So the joint mortar is done in very hard cement. The cement is harder than the masonry. So the water, when it hits that wall, goes for the masonry instead of coming out the cement joints. So the masonry starts falling apart, and you have this cement joint sitting there, and the masonry is crumbling. So you want your masonry pointing to be softer than the stone or the brick itself, and that's where you would use historic mortars. Patrick knows tons about this. He's a specialist in classical architecture, so he's studied this even more than I. D, LEED and other green building credits. You've heard about LEED obviously now. LEED is a cool thing. I don't think it goes far enough. It only goes to a certain extent. It's still using tons of synthetic materials, tons of high embodied energy materials. We need to go farther, a lot farther than LEED. And sometimes LEED can just seem like a money-making endeavor, honestly, where they're just trying to get you to pay the money to get through every step, you know. But it's still a step in the right direction, so I don't want to knock it too much. Some of the LEED points you can get for these materials: durability of the material, the composition, how much energy is embodied in the material, whether it can be recycled, if it contains any reused material, air quality. Interior air quality is a LEED credit. Local sourcing, particularly the clay plaster, is sourced here in the U.S., fairly close. So there are some good green building credits you can get for using the materials. And as a designer, that's really important these days. You can really get a lot of business just being in the green field rather than just being another designer. You're someone who knows these things. So it's important to study green building. Yeah. Next. Finally, aesthetic qualities. To me, this is also just as important as the other things. We need to feel connected to the earth. I mean, I know I do. When I feel like I'm going crazy in LA, I need to go out on a trail, you know, in the Santa Monica's or San Gabriel's, and walk barefoot on the dirt, because it feels right, it feels important. And we're so, think about it, even a room, most rooms we're in, and we spend most of our time in those rooms, we're not connected to the earth at all. There is nothing around us that is earthen at all. And we're spending 90% of our time, you know, in these buildings. So why not bring the earth inside the buildings that we're in, so that on more of a constant basis we are connected with the earth, with its texture, with its color, and literally with its energy. You know, that's not just a pipe dream that you could somehow be connected with the earth somewhere. It's literally been tested. These materials, from an energetic standpoint, affect you. And that has to do with those negative ions that create calm and actually are good for your body's electrical system. 4 types of natural wall materials. So there's many different manufacturers, kinds of materials that are used, but I want to go over some of the most important ones that we use all the time. So there's clay plaster. Clay plaster, specifically American Clay, that we use a lot of, which is a fantastic company. Specify them whenever you can, because they're great. They're great people. The material is really great. They're good about quality control. They're not greenwashing. They practice what they preach, and they locally source the materials. A lot of the aggregates in the clay plaster are recycled from the building stone industry. Clay plasters are not fired up like lime plaster and gypsum are. It's simply blending several different bodies of clay and aggregates to get it. Clay plaster gets its strength from how it's applied, and then as it dries and cures, the clay is shrinking and grabbing the aggregates that are in the mix to create a fairly strong surface. And then the applicator has to know what he's doing as well, and compress it with a steel trowel at the right point so that all the clay and the aggregates are getting pushed together for a good surface. Now sometimes clay plaster gets a bad rap, at least in the beginning, because people didn't really know how to apply it. And they weren't doing that compression stage, or they were mixing it in the wrong way or putting it on too thick. And it was either falling off the walls or it was really dusty. All these complaints you might have heard about clay. Now that's the result of it not being applied correctly, of not understanding its properties. That being said, I do make a point of asking new clients questions up front. Do they want it to be hard, like a piece of stone, or do they like soft materials that feel more like skin, or do they want it to be very repairable? Questions like that. If I feel like I have a really finicky client who's wants it to just sit there and look like stone for years and years, I probably won't recommend clay. I'll probably recommend hydrated lime or something else. But a lot of people, myself included, love interior materials that are softer. Clay is very repairable. You can literally just take some of the material, fill in a hole with it, rub it into the wall, because you can always re-trowel, re-emulsify the clay. Pretty cool. That's about the only plaster you can do that with. Because it has no chemical set, you can always re-wet it. Natural hydraulic lime, NHL. Starts out as limestone. Take the limestone, you crush it up, put it in a kiln, fire it up to a certain temperature. It becomes calcium oxide, which is a very reactive material. You do not want to fall into a pit of calcium oxide. It's what the mob throws their bodies in, because you will be gone. Like, dissolves you. Crazy stuff. So you have calcium oxide, they add some water to it, becomes calcium hydroxide, which isn't as dangerous. If you fall in, you might get a little skin rash, but you won't dissolve. Calcium hydroxide plus calcium disilicate. Now, silicate is like a sand or an ash or a clay, and that is what makes it hydraulic. Hydraulic means it can set underwater. So you have to have the calcium hydroxide portion, and then you have to have the disilicate. Most sands are silicates. These are all natural materials, and the silicate, what it does is causes this primary set of the material. So you can use hydraulic lime as a building material. That's why you can use it as a mortar. That's why you can put it on in thick layers. So in plastering, you have these 3 layers: the scratch, the brown, and the finish. The scratch and the brown are quite thick, usually almost half of an inch. You can't put clay plaster on that thick. You can't put hydrated lime on that thick. You need to build up the wall. That's where you use hydraulic lime. You need something that can be applied in a thick layer. So that's natural hydraulic lime. It's essentially, once it cures, 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, a year, it's still curing. It's taking in carbon dioxide to cure. It's returning, it wants to return to limestone. So you have all these wonderful deposits of limestone in Europe, Italy, France. Primary one that we use is in France. Unfortunately, no one in the U.S. has taken it upon themselves to manufacture hydraulic lime yet. We have good deposits here, but everything's been cement, cement, cement. So we need, to make this more cost effective, we need someone to start making hydraulic lime here. Right now, unfortunately, we still have to use some that's from France. So it's limestone, it's fired up, it's rehydrated, it returns to limestone. Completely natural limestone. So when you put the stuff up, it's like you have an inch thick sheet of limestone on the outside and or the inside of your building, which is why it's so healthy, so awesome. That's hydraulic lime, and there's something slightly different called hydrated lime, which is related, but slightly different. It doesn't have a silicate in it, so it can only be put on in very thin layers. And this is what's used for decorative finishes, finishes in general. 1/8 of an inch, 1/16 of an inch, very thin. It's supposed to be used for fresco, marmorino, Venetian plaster, tadlact. All these different finishes are generally a hydrated lime finish. But if you try to put hydrated lime on an inch thick, it's just going to fall apart on you, because it's not meant to be used that way. So it's still calcium hydroxide, but it doesn't have a silicate in it. This is where we can start going really deep into chemistry and history and all that stuff. Lime wash, you've probably heard of lime washes. They are basically just hydrated lime put on as a paint. They're beautiful. They don't last as long as a hydrated lime plaster because they're very thin. You see those beautiful buildings in Tuscany with all the layers of color and it's rubbing off and peeling away. That's layers and layers and layers of lime wash over hundreds of years. So it's another look. It's beautiful stuff as well. Gypsum plaster. Gypsum gets a bad rap in the U.S. because people are used to it being not necessarily natural. It's drywall, it's hot mud, all those things. where they've added all these other synthetics into it. But gypsum is actually a fantastic natural material as well. So instead of being calcium hydroxide, it's calcium sulfate. Patrick will correct me if I'm wrong in any of my chemistry. Oftentimes comes from chalk on ancient seabeds. Gypsum cures differently by, instead of taking in CO2, it's actually taking in water to cure. So it can also be put in very thick layers. Beautiful. We have some samples of it up here, and it's just gorgeous. You can come up in just a bit. Diatomaceous earth. It's the bodies of tiny ancient sea creatures, basically. You could actually take it as a nutritional supplement. Cleans you out. It's good stuff. Yeah. It absorbs VOCs, absorbs formaldehyde, all kinds of cool stuff. So in our Japanese finish up here, there is diatomaceous earth. It's pretty cool. Casein, you've heard of milk paint. That's what the Shakers use to paint on their furniture. Really cool stuff. It's usually a combination of milk protein and a little bit of lime, actually, to make it more durable, and then your pigment. Generally not used outside. This is usually for interior furniture or wall finish. So it's got a real nice powdery look. I love milk paint. Sealers, that's a question that often comes up. If you're designing a project, they're going to ask you, should I seal it? Should I leave it open? I generally try not to seal these materials because you want them to be open to the air, to the environment, right? And that's the whole point of vapor permeability. If you put paint over this, you lose all those benefits. So you've done this wonderful wall, and then in one very thin layer, you've kind of wrecked the permeability of it. It can be done, but there are some sealers that are good. Vegetable soap sealer, black soap sealer. It's an olive oil soap. It looks like goo, and it's what the Romans used to seal their floors. If you put it on lime that is still hydrating, it actually chemically bonds with the lime and becomes a waterproof coating. That's where the Tadlac is. If you've heard of Tadlac, I don't have it up here. It's a Moroccan waterproof sealed coating. You can use it in showers and things. It's pretty cool. And there are some synthetic creations now that are actually pretty cool and non-toxic. They're microporous, kind of like Gore-Tex. They're what's the word I'm looking for? Nanotechnology. So they have these tiny particles that allow vapor transmission. So if you have a client who really wants their walls to stay pure white, it's a modern house or something, you probably want to consider using a microporous sealer in a situation like that. Or in a shower. We do a lot of showers as well. Exterior wall systems. Lath, scratch, brown, that would be what we've already been talking about. That's the standard system. You have a scratch coat. You have your lath, which is usually metal. Then you have your scratch coat and your brown coat. And that's the layer that gets you a nice flat surface. And then you can do various finishes on top of your brown coat. This just describes the different layers. Tyvek is a nice building wrap that still allows for some vapor permeability. You've seen the black paper on buildings when they're going up. Stuff is quite toxic, tons of oil in it, not very vapor permeable. People still use it. We still get it specified on jobs, so sometimes we have to use it. But Tyvek seems to be relatively non-toxic, and it allows for some vapor permeability. So it's often what we use. Just different kinds of lath. Mega lath is a very stiff metal lath. We don't generally use chicken wire, things like that. Wash river sand is a component that's added to the lime for your aggregate. If you go to a building yard, it's just washed plaster sand. That's generally what it is. Very important to have someone putting it in who knows what they're doing, because if you don't have the right sand to lime ratios, again, it can crack and fall right off your wall. It's very important to control the ratios, the mixes, as well as the last point there, the curing. Contractors are used to just throwing up their cement stucco and walking away, because it has all the PVC and stuff in it that kind of allows them to do that. They don't have to worry about it. That's why those formulations were made that way. With these natural materials, all you need to do is make sure you're taking care of it and know what you're doing ahead of time to get a really quality surface. Cool stuff. Alternative building methods. This is subject that's close to my heart, but one that's very difficult to do here in LA because of building codes and everything else. Stone, not so good for seismic regions like this area. Straw bale, one of my favorites. Super insulated, thick walls. If you've ever seen a straw bale building, they're awesome. Adobe, rammed earth, hemp lime, which is a mix of lime plaster and hemp fibers, and it makes these nice thick walls that are super insulated and vapor permeable. Super Adobe, which is also very cool. There's a organization up in the high desert called CalEarth. I have their website on the next page. Architect named Khalili, who died a few years back from Iran. He was passionate about getting the traditional architecture of Iran into the hands of people who needed it, usually in the outlying villages where they were very poor, needed a way to build safe houses. And they were building with mud bricks, which when they got wet, the roofs would cave in and people were getting crushed. So he wanted to keep the ethic of those natural buildings, but make them safer. So he came up with a system to use earth bags. They're essentially long sandbags filled with earth, and you can curl them into domes, arches, walls. So it's flexible form architecture is the technical name for it. And these are awesome, awesome structures, and they'll last for hundreds of years. They're hurricane-proof, earthquake-proof. I mean, we should be building these like in every backyard in Tornado Alley. We should be building these as a shelter. Like every family should build one of these. They would have been perfect for Haiti because they're good for hurricanes, but they're also okay in earthquakes, unlike their cement buildings. They built their cement buildings for hurricanes, didn't think about earthquakes, right? So one of these Super Adobe domes, you have it sitting on the earth, and an earthquake comes along and it just moves around like a bowl sitting on a table. You can build them yourself. I went to the workshop. It's a lot of work, but they're fun. It'd be like an Amish barn raising. You have all your friends come and build a dome in your backyard. Really cool. And again, you want to coat them with the right things so that they're still energy efficient. Problem at CalEarth is they don't know about plasters, and they're coating everything with tar and then cement, and so these things turn into ovens in the summer. And we're trying to tell them you need to keep it vapor permeable. So they have a little bit of learning to do too. But maybe in the future, codes will change a bit so that we can build in these much smarter ways in the future. I hope so. I think we're going to need to. Fiberboard sheathing, we talked about cold bridging earlier. This would be part of an exterior wall system. Fiberboard is a natural alternative to Den's glass, which is a fiberglass. You've seen the yellow foam paneling going up on the outside of the buildings. That's to prevent cold bridging. But it's all fiberglass, it's somewhat toxic, all that stuff. So there's a company called Blue Ridge Fiberboard. They make a product called Celotex. It's basically recycled wood chips put together with a non-toxic glue. You can put that up and that becomes your sheathing. Works really well. And that can go right under your whole exterior system, whatever that is, if it's a plaster or if it's a metal sheathing or whatever. Magnesium board is another material you might want to know about. It's an alternative to drywall or to wallboard. Instead of having gypsum and then paper, it's magnesium mineral content. So it's a way to create flat walls on the inside instead of drywall, essentially. And it's also waterproof and can be used outside and all kinds of things. I have 16-inch spacing between boards. As designers, that's very important. You don't want to have cracks at all your joints when you're putting up some of these heavier mineral boards. You want to have spacing between each board. Interior wall systems. I'm just going to touch on what would be used here in LA most of the time. It's going to be some kind of wallboard, usually drywall. And you can do clay, lime plaster, or gypsum plaster over drywall. It doesn't have to be button board, wood lath, even blue board. And that'll be a question you'll get from contractors. Well, don't I have to use button board or something? That was in the old days when they didn't have anything to make the plaster stick to the wallboard. Now, all we need to do is put an adhesive base coat. This is basically a lime plaster or a clay plaster with a certain amount of glue in it to make it stick to the drywall. So it can go straight over normal drywall even if it's already been painted. So you don't have to worry about specifying these materials in a normal system. which a lot of architects are. They're like, I don't want to touch that stuff because I don't know how to use it, and I'm afraid it's not going to work in what we've already engineered. You don't have to re-engineer the entire set of plans just to put up these materials, which is good for architects. Next one, last one. We do a lot of showers in lime plaster. People want, especially in modern settings, they want a bathroom to be monolithic. So instead of tile with grout lines and everything, you can literally just do the entire bathroom, walls, ceilings, floors, with one color, and so you have this gorgeous, modern, minimal cube of a bathroom. They're really pretty. You do want to use some sealer in the shower area. The rest of the bathroom doesn't really need it because it just takes in the steam that way. These materials don't grow mold, so they're great for very humid environments like steam showers or bathrooms in general. Yeah, plaster showers I think are pretty cool. Again, you want to have a skilled installer do this so you don't have cracks all over your shower, so they know how to deal with waterproofing and that kind of thing. Conclusion, I call it the ancient future of building. I believe that where our building industry needs to get to is mostly natural with a little bit of wisely chosen synthetic materials where it's necessary. Because buildings take so much energy to make. If it's the other way around, if 99% of our building is synthetic, that's a ton of energy that's being used to make and truck in the materials for that building. A ton of energy. And they tend to not be very healthy or energy efficient. So my belief is that we can make buildings mostly natural, and then the areas where technology is important, and don't get me wrong, technology is fantastic, it just needs to be smarter, which is where biomimicry and organic chemistry and some of these things come in. That's the way our buildings should be built. Resources, just some websites you could look at for some of the different things we've gone over. A great book on biomimicry, there's a bunch of them out there. So.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a lot. You got it in 40 minutes? Not too bad. I don't want to put you to sleep right after lunch. We could go to the next one with some pictures for a little. And then you can ask questions about, then I want to have Patrick kind of talk a little bit about what he does as well. Alright, so next slide, this is the title. Conventional wall system, we talked a bit about this a little bit already, from the outside to the inside. You've got your paint, plaster finish, cement, brown, lath. On the outside you have your waterproof paper, your framing, on the inside, your drywall, your paint. So that would be conventional, the way it's usually done here. So next slide, something that would be more like a natural wall system. The outside, instead of a paint, you just have your finish, your plaster finish, which is completely open to the environment. Your brown coat, your scratch coat, your lath, your permeable membrane, the insulation and framing, that's the structure of your wall. On the inside you might have drywall or magnesium board, or you can do the same process. We're doing a house in Newport right now where she is so allergic to materials, we're going to do the same process on the inside. We're lathing the inside and doing everything. Or you can just go with drywall and then a clay or a lime or a gypsum plaster on the inside. So you can see that it works with the same system, which is nice for architects to know that it helps them kind of calm down. Next one. We talked about most of these already, benefits of natural systems. Next one. House we did in Laguna Beach for the architect Mark Mack. So he likes to do all these colorful cubes. A lot of people tend to think, I have this slide because people tend to think, oh, this is old world, I can only use it when they want their house to look like Italy. Not true. We can do super bright colors, as you can see here, ultra modern. The thing I like about these materials in modern settings is they take the house from looking like an office or an airplane hangar with tons of glass and metal, and they make it actually feel warm, close to the earth. So when that earthy surface is next to a very sleek glass surface, you have this wonderful interplay of texture, color, all those things. The next slide is another view. It's from the front. So all this, the yellow, the orange, is all lime plaster. And then the inside was done entirely in one shade of natural clay. And then this is all metal. All the gray is metal cladding.
What do you use to tint the plaster?
Oxides. Good questions. Yeah, usually natural oxides, or they can be manufactured oxides if we need really bright saturated colors. The colors will last for a long time for that reason, because they're like a rock. You know, like a rock keeps its color for a long time. Same thing. Yeah, generally oxides. So usually there's a powder to get the right color. You know, bucket after bucket or batch after batch. We're using gram scales to measure per amount of lime plaster. Yeah, it's a good question. I didn't have that. The next one. Street side of the house. This is like a gray. More yellow, more orange. You can see the metal in that one. That was a pretty cool house. And the next one. It's the Old World. This one's in Malibu. This was Brian Pinkett, who's a partner at Landry Design. Luxury home builder, basically. I think they're doing most of their stuff in China now, because that's where a lot of building is. So on this one we did lime plaster on the outside, again clay on the inside, and we did a fresco technique on the outside. He wanted it to look old. So instead of doing a faux finish, which I don't tend to like, we took, on the final layer, as it was still wet, we took just pigment and water and just threw it at the house, basically. And let it drip and took hoses and eroded the plaster so there was sand coming through, and so that you can see the variations. Next one, another picture I think of it. It's the entry. You can see how old it looks. I took these pictures maybe 2 weeks after we'd done it.
Beautiful.
But it looks like it's about
Very
500
textural.
years old. And it'll keep getting better and better, unlike a faux finish. Again, because it's, there we go. Because the atmosphere is affecting it, those finishes, they get better, more beautiful, more patina. And the next one, that's a close-up, textured color.
It's really beautiful.
Yeah, like it's, the beauty is what keeps me going. It's like
Very
it's,
natural.
yeah. Yeah, there's an artistic aspect to it. This is we talked about the hemp lime. This is like a radical system that is just coming online now, and I hope it's used more. Instead of all those layers, we saw all those, you know, layers and layers and layers. It is literally just framing, lime hemp, thin finish coat, thin finish coat. That's it. That is it. You can actually find videos online, YouTube even, I believe, for the bioinsulate or hempcrete is the other name for it. Pretty cool to see how they do it.
I've heard of it.
Yeah, it's really cool. Next one, and the slideshow. Was that my list?
Is that
I guess so.
Is that it?
I guess that was it. Patrick, you want to say what you represent?
Sure. Yeah.
And then we'll get into more questions, I guess, in the last few minutes.
I'm a technical consultant for plaster manufacture and